When the pandemic was, first declared, we had so many unknowns about COVID. We had rapidly changing protocols, trying to understand how do you protect our staff? How do we care for our patients? Where do we put these patients within the hospital? So it became very clear that uncertainty was going to be a stressor on staff. I reached out to Marissa, Julia, Amy, and they helped put together a framework of how we could go about studying this, getting real-time feedback to kind of, optimize our operations to help support staff.
What I remember from the origins of this project was getting a call from Rohit in the very beginning of the pandemic when we were all still trying to figure out how Zoom worked, with this question of how do you deal with teams that are struggling during crisis. The factors that was most surprising to me is that we saw a huge increase in stress levels that even existed far beyond the real peak of the first wave. And that anticipation and that uncertainty and that unknown was absolutely critical, it seemed, for driving a high level of stress and contributing to burnout in the long run. And so we were particularly interested in understanding what were some factors that could help mitigate that stress and mitigate burnout, even when it was likely that there was going to be a long period of uncertainty that physicians in the ED were going to have to face.
One of our recommendations was around the extent to which leaders can keep teams intact so that people can develop that familiarity and comfort working with one another to go through a journey together, supporting one another. On some other units, even outside the ED, people were assigned to one another as sort of buddies to be checking in on one another's mental health, but things like that can create a sense of cohesion and identification with the people that you're working with.
As faculty who teach and study about dynamics in teams and in organizations, it was on the one hand not surprising, but on the other hand really meaningful that something as seemingly simple as the degree to which you feel like you're a part of the team, that you're a member of something kind of bigger than just your own role, ended up being highly impactful of people's experiences of this time. And so what's nice about that finding is it points to a lot of things that organizations can do to try to feed a sense of belonging to a team or being part of something bigger, particularly given that it helps to shield people from some of the negative effects of an event like this.
As feedback was rolling in, we were making changes. And so people saw that their feedback was being taken seriously. The messaging changed.
One of the things that the ED did that was so powerful were creating channels for upward voice where everyone, regardless of their role, could be heard.
From my perspective as someone who's studied mental health among caregivers and military personnel, we already know that healthcare providers suffer from high levels of stress and burnout. So the idea of finding ways to support them during an unprecedented crisis like this was paramount.
One of the things that seemed to me to be really important were hearing the stories about the little moments in time where people came together, either taking pictures or selfies with PPE, or having moments when even just the sharing of food that was delivered by so many people in the community. And those opportunities to come together as humans and individuals in a crisis, not just as co-workers, seem to be really important for building effective trust. And that's something that I think all organizations, whether in crisis or not, should keep in mind. If you think about what it means to weather a crisis and how people think about stress and burnout, oftentimes, far too often, the responsibility is put with the individual. And while it's certainly helpful to have meditation, it's helpful to have counseling, individual level solutions are certainly play a really critical role. One of the things that we wanted to highlight in our work is that there's many important things that organizations can do that don't necessarily rely on asking more of the individual to help address issues of stress and burnout.